Good evening, everybody. What's going on? Phoenix here for another edition of Saturday Night Talks on EOS. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to my channel. It is May 25th, 2019. 6 days left, guys, until the big event, as we all know. So, June 1st obviously is coming, as you can see on this page. Hoping we'll have a pretty good turnout for tonight. I do have the live chats up, so if you have a question or you want to add to the fun for tonight, definitely interact. The more interactions, the better. I don't do these as often as some of the other, I guess, EOS personalities per se, but I enjoy every couple weeks throwing my thoughts into the air and seeing what others think too. So I hope everybody had a great Saturday. It's still actually pretty early. It's again 6 o'clock here, Phoenix time. But yeah, it was a beautiful day here. We've had like an interesting week here. It's just been actually more like California weather, really cool, and it's a great time to get outside, enjoy. Hopefully, where you are, you're also enjoying um, things and being outdoors, getting some sunshine. Also did some unique cooking, made some interesting desserts, and just you know how Phoenix rolls. So you gotta do that. You gotta balance. You gotta find a balance between crypto. I know crypto doesn't sleep, but finding other things that interest you and pursuing them. So with all that said, definitely looking for folks to come on board. And what's up, Sonata? I see you, DAPP stars in the house. And then we also have, let's see, Sonata says EOS Canada, EOS Titan, and other BPs are proposing an EOS mainnet extension sidechain. Whoa, that is going to be interesting to take a look at. So we'll take a look at that. With that said, I want to give a shout out to everybody in the EOS community, including the gang, many of whom are joining in tonight. Obviously, Enrique doesn't need any introductions, also known as the Mandela Legend. I want to thank you for tuning in. We got Sonata Systems, as I said. Looking to see where Rezi's at, and others. Bobo, Cryptotype, obviously, he's a legend. Doesn't need any introductions. Definitely, if you guys are new to EOS, check out those channels. If you want up-to-the-minute updates, definitely EOS DAPP Stars is your go-to, I guess, venue for that. You could find his information on Telegram. So really useful information. This community and this, I guess, platform in general moves extremely fast. So that's one of the things to just be aware of with EOS, and that's a little bit different than I think the speed at which Ethereum was moving at. So got a lot of exciting things there. Others on the list, obviously Crypto Feez and EOS Apologist, who's one of my favorite YouTubers who makes amazing content for the EOS community. So I thought I'd get into some of my notes for today. As you guys know, about 2 weeks ago, I think, I came out with a video on some of my predictions for the June event. And those predictions focused mostly on three main categories. One was hardware related, like a hardware wallet related product that I thought Block.one would be unveiling at the June event. And I'm going to share a little bit more information today on what I think that may look like. Obviously not the exact company that they will be working with, because only Block.one would be aware of that, but I think it'll give some insight into potentially what they're cooking. What's going on, MH? Yes, I agree. Go EOS. I want to thank you for tuning in to tonight's session. So I'm going to give a little sneak peek on what I think that'll look like. And then I have some pretty interesting links here. I had mentioned in the past, but I never really went through with you guys. So I figured we'd go through that together. and it stems on what I think will be Block One's social media project, or product, if you will. Now, a lot of people are thinking, including some in here, the Mandela legend is one of them, I think, who believe that Block One may be announcing some type of developments, I guess you can call them, with a company like Facebook or Telegram. And I agree with his statements, in that he's mentioning that this doesn't necessarily need to be a partnership, in which someone like a Facebook or a Telegram could use Block.one's solution, if you want to call it that. But and so I do agree with that, but I also think that their meeting or their news will focus more on the code itself, the deployment, and what it could possibly do. I think Facebook in the future could be one of those companies that develops on top of it, but I do worry that if Block.one announces something with Facebook there, that I don't know. Facebook's reputation right now is, even though they have a lot of users, they have billions of users supposedly, their reputation isn't the best right now. And so I do worry about that, I guess, birds of a feather flocking together type of perception that many people could look at Block One as, if they start to affiliate with themselves, a company like Facebook. So it may actually be in their best interest to allow Facebook to make their own announcements for that. And it doesn't necessarily need to be at the Block One event. There are other companies that potentially I would like to see them announce something with. And some of those would be like a Telegram. I think that would be very interesting to see. And I could see some other types of innovations coming out that aren't necessarily even affiliated with today's companies. And so I'll talk about those in a little bit. So for those that are new to the EOS community, obviously June 1st, definitely check out block.one/June 1st. That's what you're seeing on the screen right now, or what you should see. And I will be hopefully a part of that community stream. I think Enrique also is a part of it, who's here tonight. There will be other personalities, I think, participating in that. So I'm really looking forward to contributing to that, making it a lively party, and have a diversity of views, and just imagine all the excitement. This is going to be one of the few times that I think since the launch we are having this built up feeling. I can remember before the launch, actually, at that time I was looking at running as a block producer, actually, and interacting with a lot of the BPs who are in operations right now, and this same feeling. So it's it's definitely exciting from that perspective. Shout out to Crypto Media, who just joined us. He asked the question, are people still mining ETH? I don't think so. It's they're and this is coming from somebody. I'm somebody who's been around since 2016. I mean, I'm not proud to say this, but I was one of those I guess courageous few in the beginning who supported, I'll put it in air quotes, you guys can read between the lines, but I support a lot of their projects in the beginning. A lot of them were backed by Joseph Lubin at that time, and many of them raised a tremendous amount of money. I mean, I won't name one of the projects, but they had at one time, I think, around $150 million. That's a huge amount for just one project. That's not talking about Ethereum. That's talking about a sub-project within the Ethereum ecosystem. And now they find themselves basically in shambles. Their boat is sinking. And I've basically written that project off. I mean, the tokens are still there, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're not really delivering on what they said they were going to deliver on. And you're seeing that widespread across Ethereum. And, I do still think some of the folks that were involved in that project they meant well, I guess. But, from a technical perspective, they just didn't have the talent. You know what I mean? Crypto Brad asks, is June 1st already priced in? I'm going to say no. June 1st is not priced in. If you look at the way EOS has been trending over the past few weeks, this trend you're seeing upward has been shared across many of the upper tier, I'd say altcoins and Bitcoin in general. So I don't think we've seen anything priced in. And I think what you're seeing right now is what I would characterize as peak information asymmetry, which means, and that's a very nerdy term, but all it means is that you have probably, arguably, allegedly, maybe I would say 3 to 4,000 people within the EOS ecosystem who, and maybe that's a stretch, okay? Maybe you could knock off 1,000 or 2,000 that. You may have 2,000 people, I'm going to argue, that actually know potentially what's going on here, okay? The vast majority of EOS holders, I talked to one today, they're just not as involved in the ecosystem because maybe they don't have time, they have a family to take care of, whatever the reason is, guys. And so if you're on this discussion right now, if you're on here tonight, you're probably one of the very few. You're in a very, I would say, privileged position because you're active, and you're in the community. And I recognize a lot of you guys. What's going on, Build Freedom? It's Phoenix here, just tuning in, doing it a live stream tonight as opposed to a hike style video. Crypto Media says more coins moving from Ethereum to EOS. I agree with that. Yeah, they are also doing that. But yes, basically, we are the 1%. And the funny part is, within EOS, you're probably the 5%. And the reason why I say I know that is because look at the voting patterns, guys. Don't just think that the information you've accumulated is known everywhere. Most people don't take the time to even understand what's going on. And I think we tend to forget about that, because we're in this, I would say, bubble, and we have all this information we're absorbing. But the vast majority of people, honestly, guys, even the quote unquote crypto traders, don't spend a lot of time learning about what any of this means. And so if you look at the voting patterns, for example, you're looking at less than 10% of the outstanding tokens being voted. And when you further consider that there are whales in that pool, you're probably looking at, like I said, no joke. I mean, many of you might disagree with me, but you're probably looking at, I would say, less than 2,000 people who are even aware of it. Now, that's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because that's what information asymmetry is. You have most people who maybe don't understand the technology, think it's a scam, and they opt not to even spend time to learn about it early on. And you have a very small amount of people who are really into it and take advantage of the opportunity. And so that gap between who has the information, people who have the information and people who don't, is actually where you get the premium, the price appreciation. Because once the information is known, and once the information is obvious to people, once it's quote unquote official, that's actually where you see that price rise. And so if you look at a video by Mike Novogratz, who Enrique, Mandela legend, put together, you'll see him sort of predicting that, because that's exactly what happens. But most people are either too scared or they don't really care because it's not official. So they're just going to discount, or they don't really care, actually. Okay. And so that's actually what you're seeing going on here right now. This reminds me very, I'm going to say eerily familiar. It reminds me of what happened with Ethereum. Before we had the run up in 2017. And even before that, you saw similar things with it. And it's when you hit that mainstream news where you get an influx of interest in the project. And so you really haven't seen that yet, guys. And so I know it's hard, it's frustrating sometimes I think a lot of people get frustrated with this. They think that maybe even a Facebook announcement is needed, and I would argue it's not. Really, it's the tech that will speak to this project. Delivering on its promises and the scalability, and maybe coming up with native applications that blow the legacy systems out of the water. And so that's actually what I'm hoping we will see from Dan Larimer and the team. And those are things I'm actually excited about working on as well. Obviously, I'm not a traditional computer scientist. I'm more of a double E, so it's going to take me some time. What's going on, Bogo? Nice to see that you made it. We are just chatting up in here, enjoying. I'm enjoying this conversation. So definitely, if you have questions, please add them in there. But Build Freedom actually says he agrees with me, and yeah, I'm saying that. I'm basically saying that there are so few people who even know about EOS at this point. So it just basically is going to catch people slipping, and that's potentially the premium. Or you look at it like this: it either catches people slipping, or I guess the expectations, if it goes the other way, in terms of risk reward, I think this is a very favorable position to be in, just because most people are not actually expecting a lot. And it reminds me of, it actually reminds me of the launch, if you think about it, before the launch. Because before the launch, I remember going around Phoenix and here in Arizona, actually, okay? And no joke, guys, when I was going around Phoenix and talking to the OGs here in crypto, which there are OGs, maybe even in your city, but there's a fair amount in Arizona, I think, because of its history and the kind of people that come to Arizona, some of them being a little bit more libertarian minded, free market minded. You have those minds that are here, And so when I presented the concept of EOS to them, many of them liked in principle the ideas, but they were so either set in their ways with Bitcoin, or they just thought it was a scam because they heard someone else say it was a scam, that they opted not to even look at it even further. So a lot of them, I would say arguably for the past 2 years, have written it off. And my observation was that right before the launch, if you guys remember, EOS had a huge run up, a pretty decent run up, okay? We're talking about it going to, I think it was like $20, guys. You start to see people come out of the woodwork. And when I say people come out of the woodwork, I'm not talking about mainstream people. I'm talking about people within the crypto community here in Phoenix. And I don't know how it was with you guys in your communities, but Phoenix, I'm the kind of guy, like, I do these videos, but I also, I try to put together meetups. I try to reach out. I try to talk about EOS locally as well. And many of the people in the crypto community, which you have to understand is a small microcosm, a small percentage of the overall people here in America, or even around the world. Do you know what I mean? We are probably 2% or 1% at this point. So when you look at those numbers, it's just, we have a long way to go, guys, but this is just what makes it interesting. And I like the story. I like this type of Joseph Campbell's tale is what we're on, because if you look at this whole story, and even as individuals, I'm sure a lot of us are on that journey. There's a reason why you chose to come to crypto, and there's probably a reason why you chose to come to EOS. And I hope someday that we can have that story culminate with our own unique, happy endings, if you will, or happy ending. Like basically the hero's journey, if you will. Build Freedom. I don't know Ernest Hancock, but I'd love to, get in touch and meet with them. We do hold meetups here every couple of weeks. Our next one's actually going to be after the event. So after the June 1st event, I'm actually hosting a breakfast brunch here in Phoenix, and I have the meetup invite on meetup.com. I only have one invitee, or one person attending with me, who's the brave guy from what's that? He's gonna give me such Patrios. Patrios. He's going to be joining me probably out there. So I'm not sure if you guys know him, but he's here local. Sonata System says Bytemaster continues to actively monitor the EOS Telegram channel for prospective projects to fund, reaching out directly to those that catch his eye. I actually haven't seen that, but if you guys are aware of that, I'd love to see some examples of that. But I do know they have an EOS VC, and they are pretty active in providing people opportunities. Crypto Media says, is there any way to stop a DAPP from exit scamming? I think we're going to talk about that. I have some suspicion about what Block 1 is up to, and I think it may actually tie into that. So as we kind of go through these guys, feel free to interrupt me, and I guess we can certainly get into it. So the first article, or the first thing I wanted to share with you guys here, I'm out of order. Okay, here we go. The first article I want to share with you guys is actually an older article here. Not super old, but I don't think it got the recognition, the kudos that it deserved, because I think it may archetype the strategy for a lot of these social media platforms we might see be announced on June 1st. And this is a blog by Larry Sanger. For those that don't know, Larry was an original founder of Wikipedia. He was there in the beginning, and he saw a lot of the changes made in Wikipedia. A lot of them, I think, from his perspective and speaking to him, not to his liking and not in the interests of the users. And he, saw an opportunity with Everpedia, who's received a tremendous amount of funding. And he's now helping them, he's now advising them on building this new decentralized, I guess you could call it, encyclopedia for the world that rewards the content creators of that site. But they're doing a lot more than that, and Everpedia is probably just the first piece of that, I guess, puzzle, if you will, in which they're building. But what I want to bring to your attention is I think there are 5 things he lists here about how open source software and blockchain communities could, in his words, kick the legs out from under the social media giants. So this is his proposal, which he sketched out in 5 parts. And he mentions the killer feature being number 4 as the one that will kill, in his quotes, that will bring down the giants. So I think this is, in my opinion, something we need to take a look at, and I think make sure we understand what the proposal is, because it could give us clues into what might be coming come June. It could be spelled out in what Block 1 is developing, because this is a guy who's let's face it, he's been around for a long time. He's seen the flaws in the current ecosystems, in the current social media ecosystems. This isn't just some amateur, who's come around just to do this. And it's not like he's not affiliated with funding from Block One indirectly. So allegedly, this may give us some clues into what we could expect. And so his first one is open data standards. And he talks about, actually, he hints here, either creating the standards and protocols or adopting the best of already existing ones for the feeds of posts that Twitter, Facebook, etc. uses. Now, he mentions he's not the first one to have thought about this, but the W3C, which is an organization that works on these things, they already have a lot of this worked out. So if you think about it, open data standards is potentially something that we could see. Block One being one of the many companies who offers a toolkit that people can use, right? It could even be embedded in a browser. I could see that actually occurring. And I'm going to explain a little bit more. If we go to number 2, how this all ties in. He talks about publishing storage platforms. So he mentions here that this is going to enable people to publish, store, and encrypt, and keep totally secret their post. So he talks about blockchain companies using IPFS, and in particular Everpedia. But I think this is pretty critical, because if you think about the new economy of these social media platforms, it's based on data being the new oil. And so in order to have demand for data, you need to own your data. How can you own your data if the data is stored on centralized systems that are owned by the companies? You can't. That's the answer. So I think what you're going to see in this announcement by Block One is a feature within their social media system that has built-in publishing and storage capabilities. Agnostic to Facebook or Twitter, it is more of a feature to those users. And there could be opportunities where a company like Facebook offers the storage for free, or maybe they pick up the tab. There could be some freemium models there, but this would give users the ability to retain their data, okay, and sell their data. Actually sell their data to offset the cost to pay for the storage, potentially, and do it in a way that's secure, that doesn't identify them uniquely, but provides the advertisers the attributes, for example. So I could see that occurring. And I'd like to know, given the people on this chat tonight, would you guys be okay with a system like that? Would you be okay selling your data? I guess would be the question. I personally would if it was secure enough. But it's debatable. How do you prove then the security of the network? And so that would be another thing to tackle, which I hope Block One has succinctly prepared for their event, if that's the road they're going to go down. Because a lot of it, guys, and the other thing is I was going to mention is, for that event, in my opinion, what's going to make it successful isn't just necessarily the tech or the partnerships. It's going to be the story. And if you look at a guy like Steve Jobs, he was one of the few people that was a master of that, a master storyteller. And I wonder if a guy like Brendan Bloomer, if he'll be able to do that. Because we haven't really seen that in blockchain yet. We've seen a Joseph Lubin and we've seen a Vitalik, and don't get me wrong, those guys are great, but they're not pitchmen, they're not storytellers. They don't have the charisma to capture the interests of the mainstream people, and they haven't really shown any mainstream applications that anybody would care about anyway. So I always ask, and if you go back and look at Dan Larimer's interactions and things I've had with him, I've always asked him, why should people care? That's going to be the question. So I actually confronted him, last week about that. I said, you have to be able to answer that question, because if you don't, it's not going to succeed. You can have the best tech in the world, but if you can't provide the right story, which, has elements of Joseph Campbell, interestingly, if you can't provide the narrative of what the problem is, how you're trying to solve it, why people should care, how you're going to reward them, it's very hard to convince somebody to take action in this day and age, because time is such a premium, and attention spans are so short. They're so small that it's hard to get people to do anything. And so it really has to be a compelling story. It can't just be the tech, and it has to be easy enough. So I think having easy to use publishing and storage platforms can get us there. Taking a look at some of the comments thus far, we have Crypto Brad says, owning 913 EOS puts you in the EOS Million Club. I'm guessing, based on the glasses, you're in that club, sir. Congratulations if you are. Sonata System says, probably not unless it's really lucrative. Crypto Brad says, I see so many people getting banned from social medias. I agree. It will blow up fast if they have the right people get on the platform. But again, having an artist own or a person, a content producer, or any user own their own data is a very useful feature, and it depends on how Larimer and Bloomer are going to advertise this, And what I'm saying is, what I mean by that, guys, and let's back up a little bit. Think about owning your own data in a sense that the data you own could be agnostic to the platform itself. And that's a really useful tool, because if you think about it, up to now, all the systems we work on, we operate on, even YouTube, right? The videos I make here are on YouTube. They don't exist on my driver or my cloud. I could do that, but what I'm saying is they still exist on those systems. What if, instead of that though, if you were a content creator, you could go to the best media platform that offered the most incentives for you to host your content on their platform? You could have competing systems, not just a Facebook. I'm talking about many different ones, to figure out which one works the best and use that system without the loss of your content or the users of, losing users of your content. You basically make it very seamless. And by having a agnostic publish storage platform, you could potentially launch and host your videos and content on many different platforms. So by doing one recording, you could broadcast that to you. Maybe you have a tool that allows you to broadcast it to like tens or all these different platforms in a very easy fashion. So I think that'd be a pretty killer feature right there. So he talks about the feed readers, which is what I just sort of mentioned. So it's like an aggregator software. and that's what we would need, and I think that'll be part of it. But again, how Larimer and Bloomer tell the story for non-techies is going to be the key. What's the story behind all this stuff? Social media browser plugins, again, allowing somebody to select feeds and then display them alongside a user's Twitter. So you could make a system that allows you to become a pair. I guess this system would be, and I think this is the killer one, guys, that he talked about. Why is it the killer one? Well, look at it. This idea in principle is taking the existing legacy systems, Twitter, Facebook, any system that uses this, okay? And it's basically becoming a parasite, because what it does is it allows users to stay on their site for a while, but it allows people to go to what they're familiar with, which is that website address. If you go to your friend's Facebook account or you go to their Twitter account, and let's say you weren't a crypto user, you could use the media browser plugin we're talking about here, and you could see premium content without having to change the location you go to see that content. You could be on YouTube right now watching my video, and with the plugin media app system, you could see some unique content that only you and people I grant have access to. And I think that's a pretty unique feature. You could actually have a setting in there that allows you to broadcast it if you want to the social media centralized platform. But this kind of gives you the option to keep things secure while not fully, just losing all your base, right? Your family, your community. So I see that being useful. I haven't seen anybody do that yet. And I do hope that is part of the strategy we'll see on June. Something like this would be really cool. And the fourth one is social media exporter APIs. So this is just a way that you can easily publish your content using the open data standards. So you could do a mashup of things, different content, and then come up with your own host location. So, for example, Enrique, who's the Mandela legend, he maybe has content on Telegram, he has content on YouTube, he has Twitter. He could use Enrique Dapstar's his EOS account name, and that EOS account name has its own page which aggregates all this information. It has redundancy. He can choose potentially, to turn on and off the content deployments on those platforms from this website I'm talking about, or this platform. So I could see something like that working out pretty well. So he mentions here 1-2 punch here is a combination of points 1 and 4, which again were open data standards and a browser plugin. So this sort of suggests to me, and I'm going to come out here with my next prediction for what I think Block 1 may announce. It suggests to me a browser. So I think that Block 1 will be announcing, as part of their other products and code, a browser. And that browser will enable these features we're talking about. And they'll also have not only the features for the browser, their own browser, they'll probably have plugins available for people who prefer to use Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. I think it's entirely possible to see that because it's just code. And Block 1 is really good. They're really efficient at releasing this type of code. They're not specific products that per se moon or make lots of money, or they're not shit coins basically. These are actual things that people can use to decentralize their content, to decentralize their reliance on large giants. This is just the building blocks. But I think this article, really underrated article, if you study it enough and you think about what are the steps to get us from where we are today to where we perhaps want to be with many different options. So I encourage you guys to take a look at this. This article is available at larrysanger.org, and it's one of his blog posts from February of this year. So it's called "How to Decentralize Social Media: A Brief Sketch." So if you're listening, Larry, shout out to you for your excellent content, and just want to give you kudos for this article. And I think it is, again, in my mind, kind of the roadmap for what we'll see Block One announce. You're seeing it here. You're seeing in the roadmap, along with something that wasn't spelled out, which is a browser. That's what I think it'll be, as one of the huge things that we haven't seen in the space. And I think there'll be some interesting other features in the browser. I won't talk about that just yet, but I think this, if it has what I think it'll have, which is these features, it's going to be very hard for the current giants to compete. Now, how will Block One? Here's a question for you guys. How will Block One compete with? Enrique says Phoenix is an IQ whale. I am not an IQ whale. No, I still hold the tokens I received from the airdrop, but I'm not the kind, and I think you probably know this about me, Enrique. I'm not the kind of I guess EOS holder that likes to trade, or I don't like to trade EOS for tokens or speculate. I hold EOS tokens. I'm more of a mainnet type bias holder here, but I'm open to learning and supporting projects that are built on EOS. I just thought this article, from the perspective of an EOS mainnet, like tools that Block One's going to develop for, primarily for the benefit of EOS mainnet, I think. I think you're going to see some of this, and I thought that this article spelled it out pretty well. So that's all I meant. So with that said, again, for those that tuned in, shout out to John McCoffey, who just joined us. How you doing, John? Thanks for tuning in. We're talking about Block One's June event, and figured we'd do an all-night host here and just talk about all the exciting things. So I just went over Larry Sanger's blog, in which he lays out 5 steps to basically bringing the social media giants to their knees. So I thought that was a pretty good thing to start with. But we're gonna kind of go on to talk about, I guess, why it possibly won't be Facebook. Or what I mean by that is why it won't be a partnership. So partnership is not required for Facebook to use the code that Block One actually develops. And Block One may have features described that we've just went over to provide actually a better alternative to what Facebook could ever develop. And if you look at some of the people on Block One's team, you look at some of the staff they have. What I mean by staff is some of the upper tiers of people they have. They are very strong in, it seems, banking and some of the regulatory spaces. And I would find it sort of, I wouldn't say silly, but I wouldn't think that Block One would perform the heavy lifting on the regulatory space and some of the other things to help Facebook. I would see them going more of their own direction and then generally releasing the code for use. So that's another reason why I don't think they would be doing that. But let's go on to something. Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely not an Apple Card or Apple Healthcare. Shout out to Michael and Blue Crypto because I know he was big on the Apple Card and he made some amazing videos. But I never actually thought it was going to be Apple either. I sort of doubted Facebook personally. I think they'll just be novel type applications, and I have a good example for you guys to consider. So if you think about it, AOL at one time, this was probably I mean, this was decades ago, right? They were number one in terms of internet. They were the top dogs. Everybody loved AOL. This was, for some of you, probably when you were very young. For me, I was a little kid. I used to get the CDs, and I'd cop the CDs, and then I'd sign up, and then I'd cancel, and then I'd get another CD so that my mom would have to pay for internet, right? But at one time, believe it or not, that internet system, which was AOL, with all the noises and dialing up using your modem, was a big deal for a lot of people. And people used AOL chats, and they used the AOL portal to do everything, to do their email, to do their communications. It was one of the largest stocks on. It was one of the largest stocks. It was one of the high flying growth companies anybody had heard of. And then they came and went. And then Yahoo came, and it was a similar story for Yahoo, and finally Google. And in between there were companies like Alta Vista and Bing, and there was a lot of those companies we can all probably remember. For those of us that lived through that, maybe as teenagers or as younger folks, or maybe even older folks who got immersed in that. And so Facebook is sort of in a similar position. So I would say this next evolution in Enrique's, I would say we're in a similar evolution with the internet right now, guys. So you think back, and you look at AOL and what they were, and you look at what Yahoo was, and then you look at what Google is, and now you're seeing that next evolution, and you didn't see a company like AOL go make a deal, or you didn't see a company like Google go partner with AOL, or you didn't see Yahoo go partner with AOL, right? Or you didn't see any of that. They built their own business model and redefined what the whole model was, basically, and everything was changed after that. And so you might be seeing a similar, I guess you could call it the moment. There's a term for it, right? In which everything after that point is no longer the same. And so you're seeing that type of event potentially here. Not saying it's guaranteed, but all I'm saying is that partnerships that's a Tron move. Block One may be strategically doing some partnerships, but it may not be in the context of what Tron is, which is not crapping on Tron, but Tron seems to like to leverage the names themselves to be used more as a marketing tool. Whereas I think Block One is more strategic from a customer acquisition perspective, and not the hypey, buy my token, buy my shitcoin kind of a thing. And so I think over the long haul, if they stick to that strategy, they'll earn a lot of respect, because right now, I mean, as we started this session saying, is many people are sleeping on this project. In fact, many people don't even know about it. People I know who are tech minded don't know about it here in Phoenix. People in LA who are more tech minded aren't aware of this. So again, you guys are probably, I mean, like we talked about, I mean, there's probably 2,000 people or less that follow this stuff, like, who know what's going on. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But let's go on to our next story here. This is a story that, shout out to our friend there, Max, in the Gang. I got some inspiration from him last night in doing some research on the second project I thought, or product, I should say, I thought that Block One would announce. And so I thought we'd revisit this tonight. Max mentioned in the Telegram that I guess he had done some research and found that, well, let's back up a little bit. So, as you guys know, there's a lot of personalities. And if you guys have questions on stuff that we're talking about, just throw it in the chat because I'm actively watching that as I talk. And I hope that during the live event, or the mirror live event next week, you guys can also jump on to that session there that we're going to have. I think that's going to be hosted on the DAPP. If you guys are aware of that platform. So I'm hoping to do some hosting, and I know there's other people who are looking to do some hosting. Enrique says, I was about to do a cantina. No, I wasn't going to say that. No, that's, I'm not taking that stuff. That is just, no, we're not going there tonight. This is more concerning the discussion on programmable money. And so, if you guys remember, I think it was about a month ago, maybe a little bit more, Brendan Bloomer went to DC for a talk about blockchain and the future of blockchain. And he moved into speaking quite heavily about what he characterized as a financial stack. And interestingly enough, I observed what Max was saying in the Telegram chat. He talked about how, as you guys know, there's many VCs involved in Block One. There's a lot of investors involved, big investors involved in Block One. Mike Novogratz, you have the Tomorrow BC guys, Eric Schmidt's group. You have the, I think Anderson Horowitz is involved, and you have some of the others as well. But one of the things he mentioned in that DC trip was this, again, programmable money. So it got me thinking, after observing what Max had talked about and the fact that Eric Schmidt and I think it was Alphabet Company had looked at creating their own system some years ago. And when I heard that, I had to do some research on this, and he mentioned this basis project. And so I was able to find some information about this project and do a little bit more due diligence on what happened with this project, who was behind it, if there's any, weight to what Max was saying. And it turns out that indeed, I'm going to scroll down here, but indeed we had some involvement from Google, primarily Google Search and Goldman Sachs, among others. And so some of these top dogs who are running things, I guess who were running things there, were working actually at Google at the time, involved in algorithmic trading and search, Google Ads. They have a wealth of experience. They have some other advisors who are notable. One of them being John Taylor here, professor at Stanford, and he's one of the, I guess, he served as a economic advisor, as Undersecretary of the Treasury in 4 presidential administrations. So they have definitely some people here, and you could see their backers. So this is the part I wanted to share with you guys. You could see Anderson Horowitz, Google Ventures. You could see some other notable names. Digital Currency Group, for those that don't know, that's I think MasterCard is behind that group there, and other names as well. Pantera Capital, Polychain Capital. Your usual suspects, if you will. Bain Capital is another big one. But what was interesting is not so much even just the people involved. What I found interesting is their note here. So let's take a look at that and see if we can get some hints for, and then I'm going to go into why I think Block 1's going to announce this. They talked about how, and this was dated, back in December of last year, but they talk about that they had a goal of creating a, quote, better monetary system. One that would be resistant to hyperinflation, free from centralized control, and a more stable and robust than the monetary systems that came before it. Now, they started with the white paper. It goes on to say, and for those that don't know what this project was intended to do, was basically replicate in some ways the stability of centralized currency, but decentralize the ability to regulate its stability through bond and share tokens, which we'll get into. But basically what they were trying to do is create a stable coin as a phase 1, similar to a tether. But then what they were going to do at some point is, and I'll see if I can pull up, this is the paper I read, which is 27 pages. It's actually a pretty light read. But if you read it, they talk about what their motivation is, but then it also gets into where they actually want to go, and that's the area I found the most interesting. So at the very end of the project paper, they talk about how their goal is to move to this post-US dollar world, and so eventually they start talking about how they can create these local, quote-unquote, local currencies, because they do recognize that while it would be nice to create a global currency, it would be somewhat challenging to do that for a number of different reasons. But if you were to peg a system to a local economy, for example, it leverages some of the good aspects of the central bank, but it also avoid some of the issues with it. And so they talk about somewhat, they don't give a roadmap here, but you can imply from reading this that what they're saying is eventually they would go from this US dollar world to more of a CPI world. And so what CPI is, guys, for those that aren't aware, it's the Consumer Price Index. And so what this Consumer Price Index is, it's basically a way to measure how much things cost in your world, or in your nation or state, right? You could have different areas such as your housing. You could have the cost of energy, the cost of oil, the cost of different commodities, the cost of food. These are all measured by these federal or central bankers because they want to measure how effective their policies are. Now, what they're proposing here, which is pretty interesting to me, is they're proposing to move from this US dollar world to something that's more comparable to a local currency, which is stabilized against the CPI itself to maintain the purchasing power of that dollar. So that's very different than what we have today, because the current US dollar is not it's measured against CPI, but CPI is not used as a policy. It is monitored as a way to gauge risk in the system. Now they do go on to say that the new peg could still incorporate that 2% inflation target, just as the Fed does today, but there's a number of different things that are beneficial here. For one, and they don't really talk about it so well here, but for one advantage to this potentially is, if you were to create this system, today the central banks, when they inflate the money, because that's the way you control the value of money, right? Or you control the velocity of money, is you can increase the amount of money or you can decrease the amount of money in supply within the nation or within the world. Well, if you were to do this digitally, as this project is proposing, it is potentially a way to it is potentially a way to spread that cost for everybody who holds that currency immediately. Today, when central banks print money, they borrow that money to bankers who are able to loan that money at 0% interest, which is very different than what this is proposing to do. This is proposing to potentially move that supply across the entire holders of that currency. So I don't know if Block 1 will go exactly in this manner, but I did find it interesting that you had some former Google or current Google engineers taking up this project, and then they give a note here that says they weren't able to do it. And so this is the part I found the most interesting. They talk about this, this regulation, the U.S. securities regulation to the system had a serious negative impact on our ability to launch basis. So they go on to say, as regulatory guidance starts to trickle out over time, our lawyers came to a consensus that there would be no way to avoid security status for bond and share tokens. Due to their status as unregistered securities, bond and share tokens would be subject to transfer restrictions. And it says limiting token ownership to accredited investors in the U.S. for the first year after issuance. Enforcing transfer restrictions would require a centralized whitelist, meaning our system would not only lose its censorship resistance, but also that on-chain auctions would have significantly less liquidity. And then they go on and on to talk about basically regulations being a major issue here. And so what you're looking at here, if you go back and listen to Brendan Bloomer's talk, he talked about programmable money and this notion of a financial stack, and making cement is the way he said it. Making this financial version of cement. Cement, in the real world is obviously used to make buildings, right? You build with the cement, but for many years prior to cement, it was probably very difficult to scale buildings, steel being the same way. And so what I think he's getting at is, if you took money and you abstracted it, you gave it another layer of abstraction, and you add to it the ability for a crypto Feez or Enrique or anybody around the world, right, to have access to financial services for creating a startup, for example. Because again, right now, guys, most of the startup funds are from VCs. And a lot of you guys would argue and say, well, why not just use an ERC20 token or an EOS token and launch? And that, yes, that is true for a while. That was the case, and it still is to some degree. You could still do that. But there's still a gray area about regulations and accountability with the founders. So this could be another service, another way to raise money, avoiding the VCs, what I would call who's who for innovation. And what I mean by that is, normally a VC, to give you funding, one, you have to have a solid idea. You have to be a very effective storyteller and communicator. And it has to be a sound business model. But also they have to like you. And you also need to be aware of how to find them, right? There's a lot of steps to it, and it's possible that they may not see your vision. And so if you think about it, there are certain communities or certain groups that just inherently may not have access to that capital, which puts them at a tremendous advantage. They're less connected usually. If they're a type of entrepreneur that's trying to launch their idea, even if it's a sound idea, if no one knows about it, the chances of them raising that money are very hard because, probably likely, although not 100%, in their community, maybe funds are also limited. So that's a challenge. The other thing that we see with the current systems that we have in cryptocurrency is there's no way to structure a legal deal. So, yes, I can, in theory, crowdfund, raise money. I could give tokens. I could create a token out of thin air and airdrop it. Now, that's great if people want to speculate on the value and assign my token funds for what I'm building. But today, everybody emphasizes, including myself, right, that the tokens, don't expect anything from the tokens because they're not securities. Well, what if you really wanted to make a security? Like, what if you had a legitimate reason to make a security? I could think of a lot of different reasons why I'd want to make a security with you guys, for example. A security inherently isn't a bad thing. A security, in some cases, reduces the risk in creating a venture with other people, right, in a community. If we wanted to, for example, start a restaurant, if we wanted to buy a property together, if you want to start a business together, you're going to need some type of formal way to come to that agreement so that it's mutually understood what that entails and we all agree to it and digitally sign it, right? Today with Ethereum, you don't have that opportunity. It's not that the plumbing isn't there. The only thing Ethereum has is the ability to move ERC20 Ethereum tokens or some shitcoin tokens around. But there's no accountability with a project, right? There's no way I can legally agree to something with somebody and have that binding because the tools aren't there. So let's just say that Sarah, Jim, John, Lisa, Jesse, whatever names you want to use, wanted to start a local venture. It could be as simple as, honestly, it could be as simple as a farmer's market. It could be as simple as, or it could be as complex as a sci-fi startup. It could be decentralized finance locally. It could be an Uber locally, maybe using the EVA code, for example. But they would need maybe some funding to get started. And how is it that I, as a future VC, for example, a hood VC, as you guys know, how is it that I'm going to feel comfortable to give them some funds to get started on it? I mean, I'm just asking you guys, would you guys just want to give your money away? Probably not. Would the average person want to give their money away? Probably not. The other thing is, we have a lot of regulatory hurdles with governments. So, there's a lot of these considerations. So, what I'm getting at, guys, is, here's another thing. What if the investment risk today isn't really linked to you as a person, right? If Enrique is, he's obviously building up his, and I'm just using him as an example, allegedly, but he's building up his community. He's getting a lot of street cred in the EOS community for all the things he does. Let's say he expands that. He wants to expand that to even do more things and host events and all kinds of premium content. Who knows, right? Today, yes, there are ways to document that a person is who they say they are, and a person has done things they've done, but for the most part, it's very hard to audit that today as a VC. But where we're going potentially is, imagine if this financial stack had those features built into it, where as an individual I could link things that I've done, things that basically provide value to the venture I'm starting. It provides a story for an investor, right? It provides a story as to understanding who the person is. They could host a lot of things there on people they've worked with. It may not even be their venture to start with. Maybe I want to intern. I want to help somebody else to create their venture because I want that experience, and I can document that I've done that so that I can go to a VC. I could go to somebody in my community who has a hood VC, or who has a smaller fund pool, and they could feel confident that I am who I say I am. I've done the things I say I've done, and I've created some value, and I have promise in terms of delivering what I propose to. And if I don't deliver what I say I'm going to, it's not the worst thing. Yes, I am out of money in terms of if I'm the VC, I lose the money, but it also hits the person's reputation, and so there's a cost there. And so you haven't really seen this today. You've seen some platforms like GoFundMe, but those are not profiles that are specific to the person. There's no KYC, and potentially there's no collateral. So I guess what I'm getting, guys, is when I say cement, I literally mean cement. I'm talking about an engine that would allow anybody to work with other people, to execute legal contracts, to understand who the person is, to legally structure the deal, to be government regulatory compliant, and also have a way to be transparent. Think about this, guys. Here's another thing. Hopefully I'm not going too deep in the rabbit hole. Hopefully you guys are just with me on this journey and just thinking about these things, because we have to understand what this actually could mean. Consider this, guys. Today as a business, right? A big business I'm talking about, or a small business. Imagine you want to know how well that business is doing. You want to know how well that business is doing today. You don't want to know how well the business is doing when the quarter ends, as is done today. Like today, guys, if you were to invest in Ford or even a big company, or even a mid-sized company, or even a local venture in your community, it's very hard for them to give you instantaneous reporting on how well their business is doing. And there's no way that that business is liquid, meaning if you want to get out of that business, there's no way. Like if you want to sell your ownership, there's no way for you to do that quickly. What I'm talking about is this crazy ecosystem that could be coming from Block 1 that would allow not only people to raise funds, but also add the dimension of liquidity to their ventures, where you can buy and sell ownership in that, and in real time know the health of that company in terms of its revenues, in terms of its cost, in terms of its profit, in terms of what its employees are saying. So everything starts to become very blurred in a good way, like Brandon used to talk about when EOS first started. So what do you guys think about that? Is that something, if you had a system, guys, just imagine this. If you had a system that allowed you, think about every business in your community. If you had a system that in near real time told you the health of that business and offered you the ability, a way to gain exposure to that business, would you venture to help them? Would you venture to invest in them? Ask yourself this: what happens when you invest in that business? Do you help to promote their business? Do you work for that business? You see how the lines blur? It could be something that is mind-blowing, I would say, if that happens. For me personally, because I'm always looking to help people, I'm always looking for opportunities, and that strikes me as something that could be, like I said, game-changing in a sense of what it could do for humanity. So, what do you guys think about that? I'd love to hear. Do you guys think that's a good idea? Do you think it's innovative? Do you think it's trash? What do you think the crypto community will think about it? So that's the programmable side of things. we're going to get to the next parts. So this article talks about the financial stack. That's sort of what we talked about in the future, competing types of systems, all trying to gain your support, right? So we have some comments coming in. Crypto Brad says EOS creating a programmable unit of account that captures value rather than being limited to transferring it. Sky's the limit. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, it captures value. There you go. That's what people are missing, because a lot of people are just thinking like it's going to be like Tether. And when you listen to what Brendan is saying, and when you start to do this research, what you find is that it's actually a way for you to unlock the value and to, I guess, program the value. And you could even get crazier. You could do some crazy stuff with this. You could link that programmable unit of ownership into the value of the goods that are there in real time. I mean, when you think about it, it's mind blowing, right? Like think about this, guys. Again, if you were to go to a store, any store today, there's UPC codes. There's codes on them, and people buy the codes. And they buy the goods and services. Now, in classical economic terms or in classical business terms, the owners of that business own the goods. But those owners have, like, if you're an owner and you don't work there every day, say you go to work, you go and do a 9 to 5 every day. You don't know the status of that business. You don't know how well it's doing. You don't know what adjustments to make. You don't have those analytics. Or if you do, it's very costly to do so because you have to get specialized people in there to advise you. Now imagine if you ran a business, or you wanted to run a business with people who you know or you like, and you start selling goods. Now, that financial stack not only gives you real-time information on how well your business is doing, you can broadcast that to investors. You can expand your operations, and it's all transparent. It sits on a blockchain, right, that is immutable. So everybody can know how your business is doing, maybe where you're spending your funds. It eliminates a lot of the need for a auditor to come in. It eliminates the need for a lot of tax services because it's all there, what you've been doing in terms of business. And so it removes a lot of the risk you see with ventures, right? With smaller ventures. And also consider this. You could even have programmable logic built into the code where if, one of the owners, when you're gone, decides to withdraw a huge amount of revenue or money, it's not possible to do so without your signature or without a majority signature of the people who invest in that venture with you, who maybe you trust. So it's a lot safer in terms of what that could entail. Now, I'm going to add another dimension to this, guys. And Crypto Brad brings a good point. He says it also captures participation and rewards for being involved in a community it is attached to. There's an incentive to create an environment people want to be a part of. It's exactly right, especially locally. And so this is what it's not even about EOS. It's like this is a game changer if they execute it the way I think they're going to. And this is like, I think, bigger than the social network myself. Because if you think about the problems we have right now, we're not innovating enough. We don't have enough businesses being started. And so this is a way to maybe provide the ignition, right? Because I can't do it. I can't, like, for example, I couldn't start a business 100% on my own, but I could potentially do it with two other people. I could potentially start something that people need. Not to say it's going to be a Lambo, but most people, I personally am not a huge Lambo person anyway. I just want to be independent. I want to have, a business, and I want to be honest with people. And so this is the type of tool I would look for, and I know a lot of other entrepreneurs would like. So I could see a lot of promise in it. Now consider this, guys. How many of you guys know about the project Platon? Now, Platon, for those that don't know, was this project that is now associated with EOSIO. They're building a proof of location. So if you combine this financial stack with proof of location, okay, you're able to do some interesting things. You're able to add more security. You're able to incentivize your customers, and you could even have a way where, if you, in theory, okay, this is just in theory, if you use this programmable money to create a business with other legislation, you could potentially give ownership in your business to the community themselves. So maybe something that starts out as 3 people. Let's say you start a small farmer's. It could be something very simple, guys. The key is to start it if this technology gets released from Block 1, which I think it will. And assuming that happens, you could even incentivize people in your community. You could give them ownership and have their ownership be transparent. They would know where they sit relative to you. And, there's a form of respect. That is the ultimate form of respect, right? In the sense of giving someone a piece of maybe something even you created. And if you think about it, not to get really crazy or outlandish here, this could solve a lot of the problems we have, at least in America, with the gangs. Not the gangs, but the the gangs. Because a lot of them, I think, a big challenge is to gain respect, to gain a sense of pride, to gain a community. And if you think about it, this type of technology could be the ultimate expression of forming a good gang and help transform a lot of the communities that are in need of this help today. So I'm probably most excited about this tech. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, you could probably tell I get excited about it. I really hope that programmable money in this context is something that they release. And I do agree with Crypto Brad that you spread the ownership with your community. That's probably the best way to keep that business also very strong. If you're an honest person and it's transparent, you're following these rewards for people. How are people not going to want to help you, with it? I can't see that going bad personally. And so again, this is beyond EOS mooning or Lambos. This is like transformative as a culture, I think, which is pretty crazy. If you start to think about it long enough, it's nuts. So with that said, I'm going to share with you guys this article I found, and I'm going to get into my third announcement here. Just a second. So this deals with what's called third-party tokens, and I thought I'd share with you guys some visuals on these tokens, because what I think Block 1 will do is they will announce that they partner with one of these companies. Okay, what these are, for those that don't know, these are secure IDs, basically. They're little chips. And how do I know about this, you guys might ask? Well, it's funny you should mention that. I actually work for a couple companies that use this type of technology, and you guys might too. So I'm actually familiar with this product here, allegedly. But a lot of governments, a lot of firms, a lot of financial firms actually use technology like this, or multiple different versions of this technology. So that basically the idea is, if you have your hardware token and someone gains access to your phone, or someone gains access to your laptop, or if you have a hacker in another country hacking into your device, your laptop, they can't really hack it because they don't have the secure ID, they don't have the chip that would enable access to it. So, what I think Block 1 will be releasing is a small form factor chip solution that will plug into the Apple iPhone and plug into the Android through a standard connector. So, if you look at your phones, they obviously have connectors for charging, but that connection is also a data transfer. And so I think what you could see as a phase one deployment of this technology is a dongle type deployment, a dongle type hardware solution for gaining access to your EOS account. And this could potentially also have with it the cryptographic biometric type key built inside. So you could actually make these keys, and then you could print one of these out, and then this is a dongle for that phone. And then what would happen potentially is you have to also insert you have to authenticate yourself as the user. So you'd have to have both the hardware and yourself, your biometric features to unlock the wallet. Okay, and I think these will be throwaway. I haven't totally figured out how that could work, but I thought I'd run by with you guys something. I thought about what if the aspects of your biometric are themselves private keys. So I don't know if that would work in theory, because I've seen a lot of articles stating that biometrics themselves are hackable. They're not hackable, but people can basically copy them with high what would you call it? High definition cameras, right? And so once they're copied, people can make clones of them, which is kind of scary. So I'm not sure if a fingerprint itself would be the only way that this could be done. I would imagine that you'd have to have many different versions. Like you could have as an initial setup, you could have one of these hardware chips that dongle onto your laptop or your phone, but you may also have to have other factors, maybe 3-factor authentication. What I was wondering though, and I want to run this by you guys, is what do you guys think will be the secret sauce that Block 1 announces with this? Because just having a dongle, just having one of these guys is not really game changing, in my opinion. Okay, and I give Block 1. I will give them. I think I will be a fair grader. I'm not expecting Facebook announcement. Okay, but I guess what I'm saying is just having one of those hardware keys is not in itself innovative. I would like to know what their seamless process is for new users, and what is the steps. How many steps do I go from not knowing anything about EOS to getting my account and using something like this? Because I know this will be part of it, guys. I'm not going to say 100%, but I think there's a good chance that you're going to see some type of a feature with a software solution you have on your phone and a hardware dongle as an authenticator. But I guess what I'm wondering is how easy, what steps they've gone through to make it seamless. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my 3. I'm staying with those 3 predictions. You got the social media code. You have the programmable money stack, which we talked through a lot more today. And I gave you guys this form factor I think they'll have for the hardware wallets. Something like this with their own software their own wallet, and it'll talk to the hardware device, which will be beautiful. So if you lose your phone, for example, but you have your hardware device, you have a way to plug in and authenticate that. If you lose the hardware device, I'm expecting that to be throwaway. But again, that's potentially where the secret sauce is going to be. Well, how do you make a device a throwaway? If because part of it is usually the hardware, it references to the computer, but maybe they can leverage the blockchain to do that. So yeah, those are my thoughts, guys. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'd like to know who's going to be watching live the June event. Who's actually going to DC? I'd like to know. Do we have anybody in the community who's on right now who's going to be going to Washington? I had planned to go to Washington, but unfortunately, I didn't get I didn't get the tickets, so I don't think I'll be going to DC. I thought about maybe FOMOing in and joining the Everything EOS crowd, and I might still go, but it might be a little bit too late for me to grab tickets. So going through some of the comments here, Sonata Systems mentions Bancor uses your email and SMS to your phone to identify. Block One may do the same. Crypto Brad mentions Facebook login for mainstream and fingerprint to sign transactions. Okay, that's a good start. So you think they'll be using Facebook for mainstream? I could see them doing that as well. I do wonder how secure the fingerprint solution is going to be. But that would be interesting. I could definitely see them doing that. Although I do wonder though if given Dan Larimer's comments about Facebook, if they'll actually do that. Because if you look at what he's said about Facebook as of late, I don't want to say he talked shit about Facebook, but I didn't get the impression that he viewed them. He wanted to work with them, I guess, or he wanted to be affiliated with them. I'll just put it that way. But if you go back on his Dan message only chat and you just type in Facebook, you'll get some serious, you'll get some funny things from Dan. And I get the impression, in at least my interactions with Dan, that for the most part he's he likes to say it like it is. He doesn't like to beat around the bush. So the vibe I'm getting from him is that he's not a huge fan of Facebook in general. He doesn't really have a desire to work with them, but maybe we'll get surprised. Sonata System says whatever they use now will be temporary since they just funded a German company to deliver the eventual identity solution. That is true, and who knows though, Sonata, we might see that it won't be. I guess what I'm getting at is even though they just funded them or they announced it, that doesn't mean that they won't have something in time for June. Just saying, because Dan has talked about solving the identity issue, that it's been solved. So a lot of people are expecting that to be the fourth product. So actually there would be, let's back up, there would actually be 4 products, I imagine, could be announced. General purpose social media, 1. Programmable money would be 2. Or a programmable money example would be 2. You got your hardware wallet solutions would be 3. And you got your identity, which is kind of embedded with the hardware, but it's not. Martin talks about trusted authenticators. Crypto Brad says you don't have to like Facebook to use the login port over users. That is true. How about a layer 2 for Bitcoin? I did see that, Sonata, and the interesting thing is Block One. The other interesting thing is they hold like almost 1% of the tokens. So, that link doesn't work, unfortunately. Let's see, copy link address. Let's try it again. Oh, there we go. They hold like 1%. So that's a huge amount of... What's up, Type? You finally made it out. Hey, what's happening? Glad you could join us. Yeah, we've been just chatting about June 1st and what potentially could happen here. I pulled up this article from Martin, EOS Labs, the Assert Manifest Security Model. So let's take a look at this. So the Authenticator library. Here we present a layered security model that abstracts the who and what concerns as an application concern that is separate from the way actual transaction signatures are achieved in trusted authenticators. Transaction signer. Trusted blockchain network. The benefits. This layered application architecture enables trusted authenticators to be excellent custodians of users' private keys and remain clearly delineated from application-specific actions while still enforcing a security model that provides additional assurances to the end user. This way, blockchain users do not have to review all the source code associated with every decentralized application before using them, since the components of the security model in themselves provide significant assurances for the end user to confidently interact with the blockchain. Interesting. Sounds kind of like private key custodians. Can you elaborate, Sonata? What it sounds like to me, guys, you know what? Sonata, maybe that's the case, but what it sounds like to me is going to potentially happen is, yes, centralized custodian. I wouldn't call it centralized custodian, but what I'd call it is whitelist type systems with, if you imagine, I mean, yes, it sounds dangerous, but imagine that type of product may not be targeted towards you. I mean, you're an advanced, pretty much everybody in here I think is an advanced crypto user. You know, if you're on this discussion, you're probably deeply advanced in terms of at least interacting with applications the way we do every day. But for the average user, the average Joe and Jane, who has no idea what EOS is or even blockchain, they're likely, and I know you guys are not going to like this, so don't throw tomatoes at me, but what's likely going to be happening is you're going to have third-party layers. You're going to have abstraction layers. You're going to have providers of these applications, like basically platforms that offer people exposure to these fintech solutions. And there'll probably be banks that offer some type of insurance on people's funds, so that if they use any of the applications within that walled garden and that system approves of the application, then the risk from a financial standpoint anyway is less concerning, because most of these institutions would be have federal or state regulation on them. So on the one hand, it's not good because it's more centralized custodianship. It probably limits some users' exposure to applications. They're not going to have as much of a selection as we would, for example, being more advanced users. We could just basically go everywhere if you imagine that. But it's a way that you kind of give users training wheels. It's very much how AOL. If you remember how AOL started, AOL was very much like that. AOL was like a walled garden for the internet, because when you went on AOL, it was an application you launched, and within that AOL you had like things you could go to, you could click on, and it would take you only to those things, and everything else was off limits for a long time. Now, fast forward 3 years after I think that whole thing started, at least when I was a kid, and you started to see that decoupling of um, the accessibility for users. More users who used AOL got an opportunity to surf the web beyond the AOL applications. So I think that's what I'm getting at. That's what it seems like to me. If you read it enough, it seems to me that's like the model that they could go in. And like you're saying, I mean, yes, what Martin's pointing out is true. So the authenticators do not communicate directly with the blockchain on behalf of the application. The authenticators securely sign transactions on behalf of the from the document. I mean, but I do think you'll see these layers of abstractions, because expecting an average user to know all the steps you do is that would be asking a lot, guys. I'm just gonna be pretty honest. So you'll probably see an announcement of a couple what I would call walled garden services announced on June 1st to bring millions of users. That could actually be the killer DAPP. The killer DAPP could be an onboarding application service for blockchain, because it is so overwhelming. And don't tell me that Ethereum their rollout has been good, because it's like no average person's going to want to use that. It's all patchwork, and it's not standardized, and there's too much risk there. And so what a lot of the regulators are going to ask is, from these blockchains, I think, whether we like it or not, is what's the assurance for the consumer? Who's going to take the penalty? Who's going to pay the fees if the user loses their funds? And so that's where these custodians are going to play a role. And so I think you'll actually hear that on June 1st. Don't be surprised, and don't be angry about it, because you're going to need to find a way to help them get introduced to this. And you can't do that with the current system. It isn't yeah, it's crazy. It's like the Wild West. You hit the nail on the head. So that's what this article, I think, is pointing at. It's pointing at the technology, the actual code, some of the features, but I think hidden behind here, if you read between the lines, I think what you're going to see is custodianships announced. And I think you'll hear that on June 1st. So with that said, I mean, that's really what I wanted to chat about tonight. I've had a lot of fun. I've had a blast talking to you guys. I am thinking we should probably do another one even before the event. So if you guys are up to it, what I could do is I'll set up another talk just like this, and hopefully it could even be a little bit more dynamic. I could even have more graphics and things like that. But I want to get something out. I want to get the juices flowing in terms of these ideas, and I want to get something out there to the community, because today's kind of it seems like a slower day. It's like I haven't seen a lot of videos. I mean, you have the legend Enrique, throwing his videos out. I know Type put a video out recently, but just in terms of today, I haven't seen a lot of EOS content. So I thought I'd jump on here and share my thoughts about where things are going based on the most recent information we've received, and then definitely look to host another video next week, hopefully with the other content creators. I think there's an effort underway to get that started. So I hope you guys can join me on there. Definitely subscribe to the Gang Gang channel. And for those in Phoenix, definitely tune into our EOS Phoenix Telegram channel. I want to give a shout out to Crypto Feez, the Crypto Type, EOS Apologist, EOS DAPP Stars. Definitely check those guys out. Definitely some good content there if you're new to the EOS community. So with that said, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you, Sonata. Thank you, Bogo. Thank you, Crypto Brad, Martin, everybody else, who decided to tune in today. McCoffee was in the house. So thank you so much, guys. And we'll definitely see you guys next week. Peace.